Field Marshal Erwin Rommel commanded the Afrika Korps, earned the respect of enemies and allies alike, and became one of the most celebrated generals in German history. But on October 14, 1944, he swallowed a cyanide capsule on a quiet country road outside his home. His death was not the result of combat wounds, as the Nazi regime claimed. It was forced upon him by Adolf Hitler himself. His wife Lucie and his 15-year-old son Manfred watched him walk out the door that autumn afternoon, knowing they would never see him alive again. What happened to them in the decades that followed reveals a story of survival, reinvention, and reconciliation that stands in stark contrast to the fates of other families connected to the Nazi leadership. Erwin Rommel was born on November 15, 1891, in Heidenheim, a small town in the Kingdom of Württemberg. His father was a schoolteacher, not a military man. Young Erwin showed little interest in the army as a boy. He preferred mathematics and engineering. At 14, he built a full-scale glider with a friend that could actually fly short distances. His father encouraged him toward the military, and in 1910, at age 18, Rommel joined the 124th Württemberg Infantry Regiment as an officer cadet. While studying at the Officer Cadet School in Danzig, Rommel met a 17-year-old woman named Lucie Maria Molin. She came from a family of Italian and Polish descent and was studying languages at the time. They fell in love quickly. Their courtship would span several years, interrupted by the outbreak of the First World War. Rommel proved himself a brilliant and daring soldier during that conflict. He earned the Pour le Mérite, Germany's highest military honor, for his actions on the Italian front. The award came after he led a daring assault that captured over 9,000 Italian soldiers and 81 artillery pieces in a single battle. On November 27, 1916, during a brief leave from the fighting, Erwin and Lucie married in Danzig. After the war, Rommel remained in the small German military that the Treaty of Versailles permitted. He became an instructor and wrote a book on infantry tactics called Infantry Attacks that gained him widespread recognition. The book would later be read by military officers around the world, including those who would become his enemies. On December 24, 1928, Christmas Eve, Lucie gave birth to their only son in Stuttgart. They named him Manfred. The boy would grow up in military garrisons and housing, following his father from posting to posting across Germany. The family was close. Rommel wrote letters to Lucie from every campaign, documenting his experiences in remarkable detail. These letters would later become valuable historical documents. When Hitler came to power in 1933, Rommel initially supported the new regime. He was not a Nazi Party member, and evidence suggests he privately disagreed with their anti-Semitic policies. His son Manfred would later recall that his father knew about and disagreed with the persecution of Jews, but had not actively campaigned against it. Rommel believed in restoring German military strength and saw Hitler as someone who valued soldiers. This belief would prove both his making and his undoing. In February 1941, Rommel took command of German forces in North Africa. There, fighting against the British in the deserts of Libya and Egypt, he earned his famous nickname, the Desert Fox. His cunning tactics and personal bravery made him a legend on both sides. British commanders respected him. Even Winston Churchill praised him in the House of Commons, calling him a daring and skillful opponent. Back home in Germany, propaganda made Rommel into a national hero. His face appeared on posters and in newsreels. Lucie and young Manfred watched from their home as the father they knew became a symbol of German military prowess. Rommel's style of leadership was distinctive. He led from the front, often exposing himself to enemy fire alongside his men. But the war turned against Germany. In 1943, Rommel was forced out of Africa after defeats at El Alamein. He returned to Europe a changed man. He had seen the writing on the wall. Germany could not win this war. In private conversations, he began expressing doubts about Hitler's leadership. He told fellow officers that the war must end through negotiation before Germany was completely destroyed. These private doubts would eventually reach the ears of those plotting against Hitler. In late 1943, the Rommel family moved to a small villa at Wippinger Steige 13 in Herrlingen, a village near Ulm. The house had been renovated at the expense of the city of Ulm. Manfred, now 14, was serving in an anti-aircraft battery as part of his mandatory military service. He had considered joining the Waffen-SS, but his father forbade it. Erwin wanted his son to have no deeper connection to the Nazi regime than necessary. This decision would later prove significant. On July 17, 1944, Rommel's staff car was attacked by British aircraft near the Normandy front. The Field Marshal suffered severe skull fractures and was nearly killed. His driver died from his wounds that same night. Rommel was evacuated to Germany to recover at the family home in Herrlingen. By early October, he had regained enough strength to walk in the garden and conduct limited activities. Just 3 days after his wounding, on July 20th, a group of German officers attempted to assassinate Hitler with a bomb at his headquarters in East Prussia. The plot failed. Hitler survived with minor injuries. The retribution that followed was swift and merciless. Thousands were arrested. Hundreds were executed, often by slow strangulation, while cameras recorded their deaths. Rommel's name came up during the interrogations. Officers under torture mentioned that Rommel had known about plans to remove Hitler from power. Karl Heinrich von Stülpnagel, the military governor of France, was severely wounded in a suicide attempt and repeatedly muttered Rommel's name. Caesar von Hofacker, under torture, also named Rommel as involved. Some claimed he had agreed to serve in a new government. The extent of Rommel's actual involvement remains debated by historians to this day. Documents discovered in 2018 suggest he may have been more deeply involved than previously believed. But Hitler decided that his most famous general was a traitor. On October 14, 1944, 2 generals from Hitler's headquarters arrived at the Rommel home in Herrlingen. Their names were Wilhelm Burgdorf and Ernst Mazel. They arrived in a green car driven by SS Master Sergeant Heinrich Deuss. Rommel was still recovering from his wounds, but had regained enough strength to walk in the garden. That morning, he had walked outside with Manfred and noticed trucks full of armed soldiers in civilian clothes positioned around the village. He told his son that generals from Berlin would be visiting and that he was worried. When the generals arrived, he brought them into his study. Manfred was home that day. He had received special leave to visit his father at Rommel's own request. Burgdorf did most of the talking while Mazel stood as a witness. He presented Rommel with a terrible choice. He could face trial before the People's Court, a tribunal that had become notorious for its show trials and brutal sentences. This would mean certain death and disgrace. His family would suffer. Lucie and Manfred might be sent to concentration camps. His staff and aides would be arrested and executed. His reputation would be destroyed. Or he could take his own life. If he chose this path, Burgdorf promised, the government would announce he had died from his wounds. He would receive a state funeral with full military honors. His reputation would remain intact. His family would be protected. They would receive pensions. No harm would come to them. Rommel had only minutes to decide. He chose to protect his family. He walked upstairs to tell Lucie what was happening. Their conversation was brief. She could barely hold back her tears until she saw the car carrying her husband drive away, not toward Ulm as expected, but toward a deserted road out of the village. Then he came downstairs to speak with Manfred. The 15-year-old later recalled his father's words. To die at the hands of one's own people is hard, but the house is surrounded, and Hitler is charging me with high treason. Manfred suggested they fight their way out. They could shoot the generals and their driver and make an escape. Rommel refused. The house was surrounded. Such an attempt would only lead to all of them being killed. He then remembered his wallet. There is still 150 marks in there. Shall I take the money with me? His aide Herman Aldinger replied that it did not matter now. Wearing his Afrika Korps jacket and carrying his Field Marshal's baton under his arm, Erwin Rommel walked out of his home for the last time. His small dachshund, which he had been given as a puppy in France just months before, jumped at him with a whine of joy. He told Manfred to shut the dog in the study. Then he did not look back. The generals drove him a few miles down a quiet road. The car stopped. Bergdorf and the driver stepped out. 5 minutes later, they returned to find Rommel slumped forward in the back seat. He had bitten the cyanide capsule he had been given. The driver noticed that Rommel's cap had fallen. Crying, he picked it up and placed it back on the Field Marshal's head. 10 minutes after Rommel left the house, Lucie received a phone call informing her that her husband was dead. The wreaths for the funeral had already been prepared before Rommel was even told of his fate. 4 days later, on October 18, 1944, the Nazi regime staged a grand state funeral in Ulm. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, who was unaware of the true circumstances, delivered the eulogy. He praised Rommel as a hero who had died for the fatherland, calling him the Führer's general. Hitler declared a national day of mourning. The propaganda machine that had built Rommel into a legend now used his death to inspire continued resistance. The body was cremated, so no evidence of the cyanide would remain. Lucie and Manfred sat through the ceremony knowing the truth. They had been sworn to silence. To reveal how Rommel really died would have meant their own deaths. The secret burned inside them. After the funeral, Lucie withdrew from public life. She returned to the house in Herrlingen with Manfred and tried to survive the final months of the war. In February 1945, Manfred was dismissed from the Air Force. The following month, he was conscripted into the Reichsarbeitsdienst, the labor service, and stationed in Riedlingen. As French forces approached his area, he deserted and surrendered to the French First Army under General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny. The truth about Rommel's death emerged shortly after the war ended. American intelligence officer Charles Marshall interviewed Lucie extensively and later wrote a book about his investigation. Manfred wrote a letter to Allied authorities in April 1945 explaining exactly what had happened. The world learned that Germany's most celebrated general had been murdered on Hitler's orders. For Lucie, the years after the war were quiet. She avoided the spotlight. Unlike Emmy Goring, who fought legal battles to reclaim her family's seized possessions, Lucie made no such claims. The Rommel family had never accumulated looted wealth or stolen art. Erwin had been a professional soldier, not a plunderer. What they had earned honestly. Lucie remained in the Herrlingen area, living modestly. She served as a consultant on 2 Hollywood films about her husband, The Desert Fox in 1951 and The Longest Day in 1962. Jessica Tandy and Ruth Hausmeister portrayed her in those films. Beyond this, she stayed out of public view. She never remarried. Manfred took a different path. After being released from French custody, he returned to Germany and completed his secondary education in Biberach an der Riss in 1947. He then enrolled at the University of Tübingen to study law. He married a woman named Lieselotte in 1954. They had a daughter named Catherine. After working briefly as a lawyer, Manfred entered the civil service in 1956. He rose through the ranks of the state government of Baden-Württemberg, eventually becoming a state secretary. Then in 1974, he ran for mayor of Stuttgart. He won with nearly 59% of the vote in the second round of elections, defeating Peter Conradi of the Social Democratic Party. Manfred Rommel served as mayor of Stuttgart for 22 years. He was re-elected twice, winning nearly 70% of the vote in 1982 and nearly 72% in 1990. He became one of the most popular municipal politicians in Germany. Under his leadership, Stuttgart's finances were carefully managed, its infrastructure was modernized, and its public transportation was expanded. His political philosophy was described as tolerant and liberal. This was significant given his heritage. The son of a Nazi-era field marshal became known for standing up for the rights of immigrant workers who were drawn to Stuttgart's booming automobile industry. The city was home to Mercedes-Benz and Porsche. Rommel championed fair treatment for foreign workers at a time when such advocacy was not always popular. Perhaps his most controversial decision came in 1977. Members of the Red Army faction, a left-wing terrorist group, had committed suicide in Stammheim prison. Many Germans wanted their bodies dumped without ceremony. Rommel insisted they receive proper burials. When criticized by members of his own party, he responded with words that reflected a deeper wisdom. All enmity must end at some point, and I think in this case it ends with their death. But the most remarkable aspect of Manfred Rommel's public life was his friendship with the sons of his father's greatest adversaries. While serving as mayor, Rommel began a close relationship with Major General George Patton IV, the son of the famous American general who had fought against Rommel's father in North Africa and Europe. Patton was stationed near Stuttgart with the 7th Corps. The two men discovered they shared a birthday, December 24th. Their friendship became widely publicized as a symbol of post-war reconciliation. Even more poignant was Manfred's friendship with David Montgomery, the 2nd Viscount Montgomery of Alamein. His father, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, had been Erwin Rommel's primary adversary in the Desert War. The two field marshals had never met face-to-face in battle, but their sons became close friends. David Montgomery later recalled that they first met in 1979 when Manfred came to Britain on an official visit. He said they were the same age, to within 3 months, and they were the only sons of famous opposing generals. They had a great deal in common. Their friendship lasted over 30 years. They visited each other regularly and maintained constant correspondence. As Manfred confided the story of his father's death to David over the years, the British peer came to understand the trauma his friend had carried since boyhood. In 2002, Manfred Rommel and David Montgomery stood together at Westminster Abbey to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Battle of El Alamein. The sons of enemies, now friends, honored the dead of both sides. David Montgomery noted that his father always regretted never meeting Rommel personally. He said Rommel was not a Nazi, he was a professional soldier, and he had much more in common with his father than with the Nazi leadership. Lucie. Rommel did not live to see her son reach these heights. She died on September 26, 1971, in Stuttgart. She was 77 years old. She was buried beside her husband at the cemetery in Herrlingen. For decades after the war, veterans of the Afrika Korps, including former British opponents, would gather at Rommel's grave on the anniversary of his death. Manfred visited his parents' graves regularly for almost 7 decades. Manfred continued his public service until his health declined. He had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1996, the same year he retired from politics. Despite his illness, he remained active as an author and speaker. He wrote numerous books, including political works and collections of humorous poetry in the Swabian dialect. He also collaborated with military historian Basil Liddell Hart on the Rommel Papers, a collection of his father's diaries, letters, and notes from his campaigns. Once, reflecting on the many honors he had received, Manfred wrote a humorous couplet. He joked that the number of honors seemed to be endless, and that the inscription on his gravestone would read, "Please turn over." Those honors included the Commander of the Order of the British Empire, the French Legion of Honor, the American Medal of Freedom, and Germany's highest civilian distinction, the Bundeswehrdienstkreuz. He was also an honorary citizen of Stuttgart and Cairo. Manfred Rommel died on November 7, 2013, in Stuttgart. He was 84 years old. Chancellor Angela Merkel praised him as a remarkable politician and notable member of her party. Norbert Lammert, president of the German Bundestag, said that Germany had lost a passionate Democrat and an immensely popular figure who made outstanding contributions to his city and to the political culture of the country. Manfred was buried at the Ostfilder Friedhof Cemetery in Stuttgart, not beside his parents in Herrlingen. But the legacy he built speaks for itself. Stuttgart Airport now bears his name alongside its official designation. A central square in the city, part of the Stuttgart 21 Railway Development Project, has been named Manfred Platz in his honor. The Rommel family story after the war stands as a remarkable counterpoint to the fates of other Nazi-era families. Where Etta Goring spent her life defending her father's indefensible crimes, Manfred Rommel devoted himself to building bridges between former enemies. Where other children of Nazi leaders sought to rehabilitate monstrous reputations or retreated into bitter obscurity, Manfred chose a path of public service and reconciliation. This contrast reflects something deeper about how individuals and nations process traumatic history. Manfred never denied his father's role in the Nazi military apparatus. He also understood that his father had been killed by that same regime for opposing Hitler in the end. This complex truth, a man who served a criminal state but died resisting it, allowed Manfred to honor his father's memory while also embracing Germany's democratic future. The friendships with George Patton IV and David Montgomery were more than personal connections. They became living symbols of how former enemies could move beyond hatred toward mutual understanding. The sons of warriors found common ground that their fathers, separated by the chaos of war, never could. Lucie Rommel's quiet dignity in the post-war years provided a different kind of lesson. She did not seek to profit from her husband's fame or to defend actions that could not be defended. She simply lived out her remaining years with grace, allowing others to draw their own conclusions about the man she had loved and lost. Today, the grave in Herrlingen remains a place of pilgrimage for military historians and those fascinated by the complexities of the Second World War. The wooden cross and simple markers honor a field marshal whose legacy continues to spark debate. But the story of what happened to his family after he died offers something clearer. It shows how the next generation can choose reconciliation over resentment, service over bitterness, and friendship over the inherited enmities of war.